is nice.
Nice, but not necessary. In this video, we're going to talk about what the must-haves are and the nice-to-haves are when it comes to launching your podcast in 2024. And as an added bonus, we're going to try to keep everything under $750 so you don't have to break the bank when it comes to launching your new podcast.
So in 2023, Chelsea and I launched the SOB Marketing Podcast, and we're over 50 podcast episodes in.
So the next logical step for us was to start upgrading our equipment. And we heard that the College of Charleston has 2 podcast pods in their library where we would not have to actually buy and purchase for ourselves all of this new fancy equipment. We could instead become friends of the library, and for $75 a year, we'd have access to these podcast pods.
Chelsea, let's sit down right here and have a talk.
Okay.
All right, Chelsea, we just saw those 2 podcast studios. What do you think?
Okay, well, let's go through the pros and cons, right? So pros, if you're just starting out podcasting, you're not going to have to invest in all of that equipment, right? For $75 a year, you have access to all that equipment. And if, let's say, you're looking to invest in a Roadster and an audio mixer, they have one in there, so maybe you could use it as a learning curve. My only thing, and here are some of the cons, it is in the middle of the library. Now it is soundproof, and not that I don't believe it's soundproof, but we are very loud, and that's the only thing I'm worried about. It's also glass all the way around, which is fine. It's raining. So some more cons, it is glass all the way around. So if you're not comfortable with people watching you, they are going to be able to see you. And if you're recording visuals like video, you might be able to see people walk by. So that might not be great either. And one more thing, you can't reserve online. So like you're kind of at the whim of calling ahead and seeing if they have a pod open. So just something to think about, but if you're just starting out podcasting, I think that's a really good deal.
You know, the hardest part is just getting started. And so if you're wanting to go from no podcasts to podcasts so that you could get in the habit of posting, editing, and just getting your content out there, this video is going to help you.
So let's start by talking about the must-haves. Here are 6 must-haves to start your podcast.
This is an obvious one, but in case you didn't know, you're going to want a computer or laptop so that way you can house all of your podcast episodes, connect your camera, and do all of those things. So while we don't recommend that you get a new laptop, we always like to tell you to work with what you got. Use what you have at home right now. Unless you don't happen to have one, then you'll obviously need to purchase one, but it should get you by. And then you can reassess as you put a couple of episodes out there to see if you need something that has a little more memory or has a little more oomph to it.
You're going to need a podcast hosting site. So we personally use Podbean. The reason that we picked it is because it had all of the things that we needed. A podcast hosting site is going to be where you push out your podcast across all of the platforms. So across Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all of those. When you're picking a hosting site, you need to think about the cost. How much is it going to cost? How much bandwidth? How much storage are you going to have? Does it have video capabilities if you want to create a video podcast? Can you easily monetize? These are all things that you need to think about when picking the best podcasting hosting site for you. We specifically chose Podbean because it had all of the features that we needed without all of the extra stuff. We upload our video to YouTube ourselves, so we don't necessarily need a hosting platform that has video capabilities. Podbean also has really great storage for the price, and it makes it really easy to upload across all the platforms, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all of that stuff.
Now, if there's any area where you want to drop a little more moolah, it should be in your microphones, because obviously podcasts are predominantly audio, even if you have a video version of it available. Now, with the audio, what we recommend is you know what kind of price point you want to stick to for the microphone. We happen to choose this one right here, the Samson Q-U, which works perfectly. The quality is very, very good, and it doesn't exceed $200 per microphone.
And while the microphone does come with its own stand, we do highly recommend investing, especially at the beginning, for a boom arm such as this. It just gives you some added flexibility with your setup.
Now, the one thing we do want to mention here is that mics, when you're talking about mics for podcast in particular, there are two types. There are the USB mics and the XLR mics. Now, if you're looking to go the XLR mic route, you're gonna probably need a little more equipment. And so for us, we wanted a mic that was gonna be a USB mic so that it could easily connect to our laptops or straight into a camera. And this Samson one really does it really, really well for us. So just keep that in mind. What type of additional equipment do you want to purchase in order to get your mics up and going? If you want a simple plug and play, then this is the one we recommend.
So recording, you're going to need a recording platform. For example, we use Riverside. Now, you can use Zoom, but you just need to be really cognizant of the capabilities that your recording platform has. For example, with Riverside, our video is stored for a specific amount of time. So if for some reason I lose our raw footage, I can easily find it again. We also specifically chose Riverside because it is very easy and simple to have guests on. We just send them a link that they open when it's time to record. Another really important thing to note with specifically why we picked Riverside is because we don't have to use the storage in our own computers, in our laptops, because Riverside hosts our videos on their own platform.
So one of the things that you definitely need to keep in mind is if you're wanting to have some type of video version of your podcast, then obviously you're going to need a camera. Now, there is a lot of debate about how much you should invest in a camera, but I'm going to keep it real with you guys. If you're looking just to get started in podcasting and kind of dip your toe in it, you can easily do this with a good webcam. And so I ended up purchasing a Logitech because I didn't really like the quality that my laptop had on the camera version within the laptop. Now, Chelsea, on the other hand, uses the camera on her MacBook and it works perfectly fine. So you don't have to go out and buy a $2,000 camera in order to get that crisp quality. Now, if that's something that you're wanting to do now and to invest that kind of money, certainly you can do that. But just to get started, you could easily consider a webcam.
For a podcast, you're going to need a really good set of headphones. You might already have a pair of headphones that'll work fine. I personally own a pair of Beats that I use, but those are also really nice headphones. If you don't have a pair of really nice headphones, you're definitely going to want to invest in those because it makes that much of a difference with audio quality.
Get ready to pause the video. Here are the totals for the 6 must-haves to start podcasting. Nice to haves. 4 nice to haves to start your podcast.
Okay, so you're getting your podcast up and running. If you're just starting out and you don't want to spend money on an editor, having a nice editing software is really important, but I do want to say you don't want to get a super fancy one if you're just starting out. because guess what? If you're doing it yourself, you need to know how to use that software. So we use Camtasia, and it's not necessarily a must-have, but it is very nice to have because it gets the job done. It's super user-friendly. It was a real quick learning curve because I edit all of our videos, and I don't want to spend all that time figuring out how to use the software. So I love Camtasia. It's real easy to use. And another really great thing about Camtasia is because our podcast is both video and audio, I wanted a really simple way to edit both at the same time. So if you're doing an audio only podcast, you can definitely use Camtasia. And if you're doing a video podcast, you can also use Camtasia.
Now, while this isn't necessary, it is really nice to have, and this is a website builder specifically built for podcasts. So you've probably seen this if you've checked out other people's podcasts, and they have a dedicated landing page, and they have all of those episodes streaming to that landing page. They're likely using something like podcastpage.io. Now, this is the one that we use, and if you're thinking, well, why would I want a separate page for my podcast? Well, if you're looking to get people on your podcast as a guest, it's nice to be able to direct them to a very specific website for your podcast. Additionally, if you want to eventually integrate this into your small business to funnel people into your products and services, then it's nice for it to have its own dedicated page. And then that way you can also populate that page with some of your information as far as what type of small business you run. It's also great for search engine optimization to be able to help people find your podcast.
Before we got Opus Clips, I would manually go through our episodes and try to find intriguing clips that I could change into a reel form or a TikTok form, so videos for our social media. That takes a lot of time, especially considering that our podcast episodes can be anywhere from 25 minutes long to an hour long. So the way Opus Clips works is you can upload or link the video to the platform, and it will crawl the video, and using AI, it will take snippets of it and create TikTok videos and reels for you. Not only that, but it'll also rate how well they think the video is going to do. The clips that it makes comes with captions. You can edit them, you can add to the video or delete parts of the video. It's very user-friendly. Why does this matter? Well, you're already creating content. You've already created the podcast. You want to push your podcast and get people to listen to it. And the best way to do that is to share clips of the podcast with them. So that's why this type of stuff is really important, and why even if you don't use Opus Clips, you should still be sharing clips from your podcast.
And last but certainly not least, it's also nice to have a professionally done intro for your podcast. This is something that you can definitely go to Fiverr, or if you happen to know someone that's really good at mixing this stuff, then you can hire somebody to do this for you. But if you're starting out lean, this is not a must-have. We actually created our own intro, and so what we did is we created a voiceover with audio, and then we went to Epidemic Sound and we found a song that we really liked to kind of pair with in the background.
Hey everyone, welcome to the SOB Marketing Podcast, where we celebrate the SOB that you are, and if you haven't figured it out yet, we mean small-owned business.
So it's definitely something that you can do, but if you want to pay somebody money to do a professional introduction for you, you certainly can.
We spent all of this episode talking about must-haves and nice-to-haves and equipment. But before you decide to create a podcast, there are some questions that you need to ask yourself about whether or not podcasting is right for you and your small business. So go to this link. We have a free download of all the questions you need to ask. Make sure that you're prepared to start your podcasting journey.